You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, alongside former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. We'll discuss the future of England's T20 side after their back-to-back defeats at the start of the series in India. And we'll ask if Joe Root should still be part of the setup after some brilliant batting, including three half-centuries for the Paarl Royals in the SA20. Pakistan cricket writer and broadcaster Behram Qazi will join us to reflect on their historic defeat to the West Indies, who in turn secured their first test win in that country since 1990. ESPNCricinfo's Valkerie Baynes joins us to reflect on a dismal women's Ashes for England, and we'll ask what next for both Captain Heather Knight and head coach John Lewis. And we'll round up some of the week's other big stories as Rocky Flintoff scores a century for the Lions in Australia. And of course, we'll bring you the final word. Joe's been opening the batting for the Paarl Royals in on the country's slowest pitch at Borland Park in Paarl. He's genius, absolute. It was mesmerising, compelling to watch the level of skill. And I know that. I mean, I know how brilliant he is. There's a perception that he's not in England's best T20 side because his strike rate's not high enough. Do you remember we always used to call David Milan the mechanic? Yeah. He was there to fix an innings if it got broken. But you know, I wonder really. I mean, is Joe not in the T20 setup because of workload, or or is he only suited to difficult conditions? I mean, on a flat track, do we just want to pick Big Daddy in giant haystacks?
Yeah, Big Daddy
it out the ground.
That's exactly what we've been doing. We've been picking Big Daddy and giant haystacks, and they keep getting for the size of Big Daddy and giant haystacks. They keep getting caught inside the ring. Never mind on the edge of the boundary. So, look, class is always going to stick out with Joe, and he's in the ridiculous form of his life in the last 5 years in Test match cricket and all cricket, and I think that's why we see him back in the white ball fold. I would have him in every team. I would never, from a selection panel point of view, I would never want to go into a game of cricket with three lions on my chest with a team that didn't have Joe Root in it, because Joe Root is not only one of the best batters of all time. He plays situations brilliantly, like you say. In difficult situations, he stands up and he comes to the fore, a little bit like Ben Stokes in the middle order. I don't see any reason why he couldn't bat three for the T20 team with Jos Buttler opening the batting. So I also have a train of thought now where that's been my opinion for the last few years. This SA20 competition, I think it's quite a good competition for Joe just to recharge his batteries, take his family out to South Africa for 2 or 3 weeks, have an enjoyable game of cricket with less pressure on. That's not. I mean, I'm not saying we should be looking after Joe that way because he's an England centrally contracted player, but the age he's at, I think that constant international treadmill might be from a recharge and batteries point of view. This might be a good thing for England that he's not playing for England, but enjoying his cricket and keeping up his form while enjoying some family time and a nice warm sun. It's not in freezing cold England. And then he comes back into the white ball fold for the Champions Trophy, the ODIs and the Champions Trophy. So there's two ways of looking at it. I would have him in every team I pick because for me he's still the best player that we've got at manipulating situations. And when it comes to strike rate, that's what if you've got Joe Root in number 1, 2, or 3, you can have a Jamie Overton, Bryden Carse at number 7, Livian Livingston at 7 and 8, because they're effective then. Because Joe Root will score runs, take up balls at the top of the order, and buy time for the bottom end to be explosive. But when the bottom end's going in with 5 overs to go, I mean they're not them type of players. They're not good enough for them type of players. So, and I think that from a balance of the side, I think would work better if Joe was in the team rather than playing in the SA20.
I must tell you that he's being accommodated in a villa at the luxury golf and lifestyle estate in Pearl Valley, and I mean, he is.
Why would you want to go to India?
He is in the lap of luxury, I tell you. And Harmy, he is just oozing happiness and contentment. I mean, I honestly, and he's obviously being paid heaps of cash as well. So quite frankly, this is better than a rest for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's scoring runs, he's bowling 4 overs in every game as well. He's in the lap of luxury with his family. And I whisper it, but I wonder whether he might have half a doubt. So if Baz gave him a call and said, "We need you back in the T20," I think Joe might think twice.
Yeah, I would as well. I would as well, because I think there's that fine balance, that happy place of. I think Harry Brook's going to have to find it out more often. Ben Duckett's the same. When you're playing all three formats, it is very, very tough. And the one thing about Joe is you see him in the summer, in English summer. If there's a game of cricket going and he's allowed to play, he rocks up and he plays it as though he was playing for England, the best of his ability. He played T20s in the summer for Yorkshire. He's played a few first-class games for Yorkshire every single season going forward. So going back, so. He does love the game of cricket, and the best thing I've seen from him out there, Manners, and you see videos on social medias. He's Joe Root. I mean, he's got time for everybody. He's got time for everybody. He's spreading the word of cricket in Africa, and I'm sure there's kids on the side of the fields, whether it's at Newlands or at Paarl or at Johannesburg, when they get up close and personal with one of the greats of all time, he doesn't disappoint. He doesn't disappoint. He inspires young people to play cricket. So, and that's been evident from when he's out there and he's enjoying himself. So, yes, I'm sure I'd be enjoying Pearl Valley as well, because it's a lovely golf course. It's a lovely place. And he's getting to spend some time with his family. So he's still in a good, rich vein of form from a runs point of view. And he'll transfer that when he gets to Nagpur, when we all get there in a few weeks' time for the ODIs.
And just very, very quickly, you stick with the current crop then? You started off by saying that this is England's best team. So you're not looking elsewhere then? Tom Banton has scored a couple of hundreds in the T20 in the UAE. Or does the fishing net stay packed up? We're not going to be casting it around for new faces.
No, I think it stays. I think it stays where it is for a while. I mean, look at where does Tom Banton fit in? He's a good player and he has had a good recent past. But I mean, you've got Josh Butler. You've just brought Ben Duckett in, so you've got to give him a chance. You've got Phil Salt, who's got a couple of hundreds in the Caribbean not long ago, and then Josh at 3, Harry Brook at 4. I'm looking at that going, it's very, very difficult to get into that group. The only person I'd change it for is if Joe became available and you wanted to put Joe into that top group, because you couldn't not pick him. But I think of the rest, I think from a character point of view, I think there's got to be a certain way in this dressing room for Brendan McCullum to allow you in, because if you're the opposite way, you've got no chance. And I think we've seen that with some of the selections and some of the omissions over the recent past, that I think you have to have a character that fits into this group. And it's not all about the game, your technical qualities.
You're listening to Following On with me, Neil Manthorp, along with Double Ashes winner Steve Harmison. Don't forget, you can hear live and exclusive ball-by-ball commentary of England's ongoing white ball tour of India on talkSPORT 2 and the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel. But it's time to talk Test cricket now with Behram Qazi, Pakistan cricket writer and broadcaster. Behram, let's go straight to the result of the second Test. West Indies winning their first Test in Pakistan since 1990. 120-run win in Multan. And I must say that for the neutrals, and obviously West Indies cricket supporters, it was fascinating, absolutely wonderful, and a certain sense of delight that that Pakistan's unashamed approach of preparing raging turners backfired rather spectacularly. I mean, Harmy and I just can't get over the fact that the West Indies were 50 for 8 and won the Test match.
Yes, I mean, it is that sort of occasion. First of all, good afternoon to both of you guys, and it's always a pleasure to be here, Manners and Harmy. And yes, I mean, I can completely understand the sense of delight because, you know, the West Indies, pound for pound, are not as good a team on paper, a Test team on paper, as Pakistan are, and they weren't favourites by any means. But, you know, from Pakistan's perspective, I will say this, that this was bound to happen. It was inevitable from the moment they decided to reuse the surface in Multan versus England. You know, you're rolling the dice, and when you are curating surfaces which are rank turners of this degree, it is a bit of a shootout, right? You're bringing the opposition into the game and you're making the game a bit toss dependent as well. Not to say that Pakistan can't win a test match at home on these sort of surfaces when they bat last. They did it versus England in Rawalpindi, right? So we know they can, but you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you lose the toss in these sort of conditions, because no one wants to bat last when the ball is turning square from ball one, literally. But to your point, Pakistan had the West Indies at 38 for 7, then 54 for 8, then 95 for 9 in the first innings. The West Indies went on to score 163, and 9, 10, and 11, Moti, Roach, and Warrican were the highest scorers for the West Indies in that innings. And that wasn't even the first time they had done it. They'd literally created that record in the previous test match. So kudos to credit to the West Indies. I mean, I think they did a really good job. They maximized the conditions. As far as Pakistan is concerned, look, this was on the cards. I don't think this should come as a surprise to anyone. From the moment they gambled versus England, this could have happened. It has happened now, and perhaps the way forward from here is to just kind of make those turners a bit more tame. If the ball starts to turn at the end of day 2 or at the start of day 3, much like what they used to do in the UAE, where they were very successful, that might just be the way forward, and this could be another learning curve in this entire process.
Yeah, but I mean, Pakistan. To be fair, if I was a Pakistani cricketer, you just get criticised if you play on flat ones and you can't win a game. You play on raging turners and you give the opposition a chance. When you look at that sort of scenario, I mean, I'd much rather play on a wicket which has got a result in it and have the odd defeat. So if for instance, they've gone and beaten England. Obviously they've had the result against the West Indies. If they play on the 3 pitches in the next series against whoever and win 3-0, all of a sudden you're looking at it and going, well, yes, you're right. It is bound to happen, but I'd much rather play on these surfaces and giving us a chance to winning as opposed to playing on the flat ones and having no result whatsoever and not producing cricket which is exciting in our country, because I can't imagine it being very, very good watching on the flat ones for 5 days and nowhere near a result.
It's torture, Harmy. I've, been in those press boxes when those test matches were taking place. That first Bazball series versus England. I mean, credit to England that they forced results, particularly in Rawalpindi. But you're absolutely spot on saying that we would much rather, in Pakistan, have these raging turners as opposed to those absolute highways, right? I mean, I remember a test match that Pakistan played versus Australia and Rawalpindi, and 14 wickets fell in the entirety of that test match. Over here in Multan, in the second test, 20 wickets fell in a single day, which was a record not just for Pakistan, but also the subcontinent. So it's two extremes, really. I want them to find some sort of solution that is bang in the middle. And, Pakistan were a very successful team when they were in the UAE because that's what the template was over there. The first 2.5, 3 days were for batting, and then the pitch would start to turn square. So I think you're right to say that this is far better than those flat decks where you're playing out 5 days of Test cricket and you don't often get a result. Unless England is playing, because Ben Stokes will always get a result. But yes, I mean, I think they tried something new. Credit to them for trying that. And it was a gamble. It paid off for the most part. They did this in 4 test matches. They won 3. My point is that you won't always win the toss and you won't always win a test match in these conditions when you're batting last, even if you're a really, really good team playing spin. Now, Shan Masood mentioned in the post-match interview that domestic tracks will also be curated in the same sort of fashion so that batters can get more practice. My counter to that, which was echoed by Danial Rasool in his piece for Cricinfo, was that Pakistan, till November 2026, are only playing 2 more home tests versus South Africa. And South Africa have a certain Keshav Maharaj as well. So this ploy will work versus certain teams and not versus the others. South Africa, probably, it's fine. You could still go spin to win. But what happens when Sri Lanka do it, right? It gets a bit more tricky, which is why I want more UAE-like surfaces in Pakistan, which I think will benefit the team in the long run, because your development as a test unit is hampered when you are producing raging turners. We can see that with India as well. When batters aren't spending time out in the middle, then they tend to struggle elsewhere as well because they haven't just, spent a lot of time out at the crease. So it's an interesting sort of predicament. And there's a lot of food for thought here for Pakistan, but it isn't like shambolic by any means. If anything, I think this is entertaining Test cricket.
Saddest thing for me is that for most of my life, I've regarded Pakistan as one of the great nurseries for fast bowlers. I mean, this is the country of Imran and Wasim and Waqar and so many others. I mean, what do you? I just think that I think it's terribly sad, and that's why we like decent cricket wickets which offer a little bit of everything.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on because we've got to find out what. Yes, go on then.
Just a bit on that, man. I completely agree with you because Pakistan has very rich fast bowling heritage, like you mentioned. And of course, when you produce these sort of tracks where your lone seamer is going to get 10 overs max in an entire test, you are hampering their development as well. So it's not just the batters. So yes, some sort of middle ground would be nice where you aren't tilting a test match heavily towards one skill. I think that doesn't make for a great long-term strategy.
Okay, we need to talk about Champions Trophy. For the rest of the world, it's an embarrassing shambles. I mean, tickets for the final not going on sale till 4 days before. I don't know how it's going down locally. We are still hearing rumours that the stadia, the three venues are far from ready. I don't know whether the seats have been installed yet, but there's still speculation, I have to confess, quite a bit of it out of India, so you don't know whether it's mischief or not, that the whole tournament might be moved to the UAE. How is progress?
So I'll address these things one by one. You mentioned the tickets first, and literally it was yesterday that they released any information about the tickets for all games that are going to be held in Pakistan. This does not include the knockouts at all. And today, I believe those tickets went live, so you can actually purchase tickets to all the games in Pakistan now, which is a good sign. But what really is frustrating is that Pakistan hasn't hosted an ICC event since 1996 when they co-hosted the ODI World Cup with India and Sri Lanka. This was a fantastic opportunity to boost the country's economy and, boost tourism in general because you expect, people and fans from different nations to come and watch their teams play. There should have been, tourism packages, if anything, in which you kind of, if you're from England, you follow the team everywhere they play. And then you have all of these other touristy attractions kind of packaged in the same deal so that you're completely taken care of. That should have been the strategy, and I haven't seen any of that. We are 20 odd days away, roughly 2021, 3 weeks away from the start of the tournament, and they've just made the tickets live. So now you can finally purchase them. But what about the games in the UAE? What about the knockouts? There is still no information on that. And that is indeed shambolic. You are correct when you say that. As far as the stadia are concerned, Manners, from what I have been told, and all of my sources have confirmed this to me, that we are in the finishing stages. So just some final touches remain. And the bulk of all the work has been completed. And, the PCB chairman, Mohsin Naqvi, he went on to make a power move very recently where he switched the venue of the upcoming tri-series between Pakistan, New Zealand, and South Africa from Multan to both of Karachi and Lahore, just to kind of make a statement that they will be complete. And, this is a very powerful and influential man, Mohsin Naqvi. And truth be told, the stakes are as high as they could be, right? And his reputation is on the line. So I do expect him to deliver over here because if he doesn't, then he will be taken to the cleaners. There's no other way to put it.
And Behram, just finally from me, yes or no, will it be in Pakistan?
Yes, I think so. I think we have emotionally moved on from all of this venue brouhaha. And India have reached an agreement, of course, where they've said that they'll be playing all their games in the UAE, but even in future tournaments, right? ICC tournaments which are held in India, Pakistan won't be playing in India. I would take that with an ounce of salt. I would say this because Pakistan doesn't get to host very many ICC events. And when it comes to India, they are very frequent hosts. So let's see if they honor those agreements or not, because I'm still a bit skeptical of that. But for now, at least there is peace. And let's have some cricket, for crying out loud. I mean, these are two cricket mad nations. We absolutely adore this sport. And we want to see, some quality cricket happen without any chaos. But that might just be a pipe dream.
It is Pakistan, after all. That defeat to the West Indies, very, very quickly, finally from me as well, meant that Pakistan finished bottom of the World Test Championship, which it doesn't augur well for the format. What's your prediction for the next cycle and the next two cycles, the next 4 years of Pakistan Test cricket?
It's interesting how if they had that two-tiered system right now, Pakistan would have been relegated. But luckily for them, it doesn't exist just as yet. I mean, look, the test team is a work in progress. I think they performed a bit better than what those results suggest because they won 2-0 away in Sri Lanka. And then, they came back to defeat England. And then there's this series, which, it was a bit of a lottery with respect to the surfaces, if I'm being real. That Bangladesh home series loss will haunt them. And I think it's fair to say that they were, right at the bottom in this particular World Test Championship cycle. So that table reflects or paints a good picture of where Pakistan cricket was at in these last 2 years. I do expect things to get better. I think that their mindset is more result oriented now, at least as far as home tests are concerned. And they do have some quality players in that team. Saud Shakil has been in terrific form. Mohammad Rizwan is one of the best wicketkeeper batters going around in world cricket. And, now they've got some spinners, some fast bowlers on the fringes. My only concern with respect to Pakistan and some of the other test nations which don't get to play a lot of this format is that if you don't play a lot of this format, how do you get better? That is my only major concern over here. But I expect them to not finish last in the next cycle. Let's just say that. I don't think they will be front runners to make the final. They're not there yet. They're not even close. But they could be someday. All hope is not lost. And the beauty of the World Test Championship, at least as of now, is that teams which actually play these two test match series have a bit of an advantage in terms of the percentage points that they get if they win. South Africa is a prime example, in this current cycle. So, I mean, this is Pakistan cricket. It will ebb and flow drastically. And we'll just wait here for the next high, I suppose.
I'm delighted to say that our next guest, Valkerie Baynes, has the onerous task of explaining what has happened in the women's Ashes down under. ESPNCricinfo's women's cricket writer. Val, Australia are 12-0 up going into the test match. It's a disaster. And you didn't see this coming. I don't think anybody did they?
No, not at all. I hold my hands up. But the last time we spoke, I said I was really interested to see just how close this was going to be, implying that it was going to be close. That was probably based largely on the last Ashes campaign here in England, where they drew 8-all. And I expected a lot more from this England side and for it to be a lot closer. There was talk about Australia having been stung by that result, I guess, and the caution that they were going to come back stronger than ever. They certainly have, but I don't know that anyone sort of saw that it was going to be quite this much of a wipeout.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about, I think, about a lot of external stuff. And having been part of a 4-1 and a 5-0 Ashes defeat out in Australia, it is a difficult place to go and play. And especially when you just mentioned there, Australia had their backs up. They were ready for England off the back of that 8-all draw in the last Ashes. Is it too simple to say that Australia is just so much better than England and their players are so much better than England rather than looking for outside stuff? Or is it, have England been really that bad?
In this instance, Australia have just been so good, so much better. I think what you raise is really interesting in terms of home ground advantage, and there's better than anyone what it's like playing sort of home and away, and there was talk about that being a factor. England were very aware that going over there was going to be hard, playing Australia in their own house. And I guess you could argue, Australia found it hard being over here in England last Ashes series. However, I mean, if that was so much of a factor all the time, teams wouldn't get rolled at home ever. So there's got to be that taken into consideration. You are playing away, and I just don't think playing away can explain the gulf between these two sides.
Val, I don't want to open myself up to ridicule and walk down the John Lewis path, but I mean he said that he went for a walk one evening from Bondi to Coogee Beach, and everybody was in the water, and everybody was, fit and healthy, and that lends itself to a more conducive sporting environment. And he sounded a bit like a nutter, but I do kind of understand what he's saying. I mean, it would be easier to live that life than to go to an indoor school in the middle of February in Nottingham.
Yeah, sure. But again, I don't know that that can explain the gulf between these two sides. They were close here in England last time they met, and so you can't sort of put that down to differences in lifestyle because that hasn't changed in the last 18 months. We know, there are differences in sporting cultures, I guess, between the two countries, but there's also, talk of that gap, or has been talk of that gap closing, the professionalization of the women's game over here, the restructure and that sort of thing. And that was seen to be basically an answer to Australia forging so much further ahead. And that came about after the 2019 Ashes series here, when England lost 12-4. There was ultimately this restructure of the game over here on the premise that, they were going to catch up to Australia. So that happened. We've seen great leaps happen in the women's game over here, but, just not to the extent that they're going to beat Australia at home, evidently, on the basis of this series. I don't think we can put down improvements in the game being stymied by, an inherent difference in climate and culture and upbringing.
Val, Manners knows that I'm very, very good at putting my foot in it when this mouth opens. So I'm going to probably do it again here. When I've listened to the John Lewis stuff, and the culture is different in Australia, but it's not been that different for the last 125 years we've been playing cricket, both home and away. And I mean, John Lewis lived in Brighton, so he understands in the middle of English summer, there's a lot of people in the sea in the middle of the English summer. I've seen a lot of the games, but I've not seen all of it. And I just wonder if, the way the women's game's gone, the trajectory it's gone, especially in England, that we've been given more professional contracts, the players have been paid more, everything that goes with it. And I always work with the theory that when you get a young player, whether it's a boy or a girl, once they get that tracksuit, they think they've met it and they don't work as hard, or they feel as though, right, who are you to talk down to me? Who are you to tell me what to do? And are we in a situation in England that because of the trajectory of the 100, and Manners will tell you, Val, I have spoke so well of the women's game and the 100 and the trajectory it's on. Have we just been a little bit complacent where we've been given these contracts, we're looking at paid the same as the men, and we're looking as though our career paths are going in such a way we are professional, but when you go professional, you have to work as hard, if not harder. And did we see that with the England team?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Harmy. And I think, it's hard not being behind closed doors and knowing what those conversations are and whether they are responding to, what they're being told to do or not. But I sort of picked up on a similar theme with John Lewis after the last T20 defeat in Adelaide last week. And I asked him, given that 8-8 draw in England last time around, did you go into this series a bit overconfident, or with a little too much confidence? He said no. He said it gave us some confidence, but not too much. And I guess you're not going to want to say, yes, we went up against the Aussies, with too much confidence and what have you. But it was something that had occurred to me. Did they actually think that they were going to be a lot closer than they actually are, given that result last time around? And, I don't know what work went on behind the scenes after that, but I think a lot of it to me has looked like, the mental side of things being the difference here between Australia and England. Australia have come out and, wanting to really make a mark early, and once they had, wanting to grind England into the dust, and they have again, whereas, England haven't sort of shown sort of a mental approach that suggests that, they think that they can beat Australia in Australia.
It does seem as though there's a team believed in their own hype, and I know what it feels like because in 2005 we probably did. Went there in 7, and within 11 days, the series was gone. How do you change that mentality? Because it's the same captain, it's the same coach, and more by and large, similar players.
Yeah, I think one thing that stood out for me in that respect is there's been, so much talk since John Lewis came in as head coach about how they want to playing this inspire and entertain style and what have you. And that's been spoken about ever since, he came on board. And even early in this series, after the first one day in North Sydney, there was sort of talk about, yeah, we lost, but we're playing how we want to play. And so, that's okay. I would say if you're playing how you want to play, but it's not working, you've got to make a change. So in terms of, if we're sort of focusing on the mental side of things, after that question I put to John Lewis last week about being, confident or overconfident, he said, look, we're just not executing in the moment. And that, again, comes back to mental approach for me. So I think, you have to sort of sit down and say, we need to be able to adapt and change when things aren't going our way, not just stick to our mantra. And I think, he admitted that Australia are, the best at that. They adapt and change and do what they have to do as the situation dictates. And I think that's something that's been lacking for the England side.
Finally, from me, Val, Heather Knight's come under criticism as well, come in for criticism. She did sound a little bit delusional after a couple of the defeats, and she said we weren't that far off. When you lose a T20 game by 30-odd runs, you are quite a long way off. John Lewis has insisted that he's the right man for the job. And interestingly, Nat Sciver-Brunt, answering a question, not sort of putting herself forward, she said she would love to captain England. So don't sit on the fence here. Feel free to jump off the fence. Should there be sweeping changes? Is Heather Knight the right person to carry on? Is John Lewis the right coach?
I think that in terms of that question put to Nat Sciver-Brunt, I think she answered it in the way that I would expect her to. If she had have come out on, one side saying, yes, I want the job now, or no, I'm not cut out for it, that would be like a massive story. But she has just basically said, I think, what you'd expect her to say as, a vice captain or one of the leadership group. So I think if you're going to ask whether Heather Knight should stay as captain, you've got to look at who would come in instead, and whether they, would be happy with, who they've got waiting in the wings. I mean, Nat Sciver-Brunt says she wants to do the job, and if they decide that that's the way it's going to work, then fine. But yeah, I think they have to look really closely at who they've got to come into that role and as a deputy to Sciver-Brunt. Likewise, with the coaching, it's a case of, do they think that they can get results by persisting and, going on with the current, state of things, but with changes within what they're doing? Or is it a case of, do they need a fresh approach? And, who would they get to come in?
And in 10 seconds, England have got no chance in the test match, have they?
I just instinctively shook my head straight away.
So did we.
Yeah, on the basis of what we've seen, I really don't think so. And I also feel a bit too that if they win the test, what does that say about this campaign overall? Is it like, oh, well, actually, it's not as bad as we thought? Or, is it that, does it paper over the cracks, I guess, is what I'm asking. But on the basis of, how we've seen these two sides play, I think Australia will walk away with the test as well.
This is the highlight of the week for Harmy and I, when we pick out the stories that have caught our attention, caught our eye, and or just tickled our fancy. Let's start with Rocky Flintoff, shall we, Harmy? I didn't know whether to find it eerie or comforting when I see Rocky, and when I see the clips, and I just think, It's Andrew.
It is. It is.
It's Fred. It's Fred.
It is. It is, and it's great. And honestly, it is. It's great to watch him, how he's developing and going. You got to remember that he's 16 years old. And when he was picked, part of me was going, do you know what? It's a good thing that you're exposing him and Hamza Sheikh and one or two other young players. Would they be better with the under-19s and go and dominating with the under-19s? But I think this Lions group now, it's not England A as such. It's not the next cabs off the rank. It's the ones that we want to, because the way, I mean, man, how many times have we scratched our head going, well, they're not picking him. They're looking through the pathway rather than first-class cricket. So in that aspect, you flip it over and you go, yeah, I can see why they've picked Rocky and Hamza Sheikh and one or two others to make sure that they're getting exposed early, they understand the game. My only concern would always be that if you, especially someone like Rocky who's played for Lancashire this year, who haven't had the greatest of years, are we teaching sort of 20 balls, 30 balls and losing, and it becomes a habit? But I think that's also the message of the coaches and everything that goes with it. But to see the young lads go and enjoy themselves, and not just Rocky, I think Ben McKinney from Durham's had a decent trip over there. It was great to see Pat Brown taking some wickets, but Rocky will always make a headline, unfortunately. I mean, until the day he finishes playing cricket, he will always be Andrew Flintoff's son. I mean, it's inevitable because of the character and the charismatic character that Andrew was and the way he performed for England. What Andrew will be hoping that Rocky does what Chris Broad's son Stuart did and surpass everything that he did in his career, and then they can just leave Andrew out of it and let Rocky get on with his days. But hey, I was so pleased for him, and the enthusiasm of youth when you're seeing the celebration, you see him walking off the field and embraced by his teammates. That's why exposing kids sometimes early and the naivety towards that, especially when they go well, I think it fast forwards their education in the game very, very quickly. So I'm pleased to see that. I was pleased to see some of the others obviously do really well in that Lions trip, and it's been a worthwhile experience for them, because I don't think they are the next cabs off the rank. Possibly Ben McKinney if he starts well for Durham, and the openers the England openers of Duckett and Crawley either get injured because they ain't getting dropped. So there might be a case there from a spin bowling department. Young Coles has done not too badly out there. The fast bowlers have done nicely. It's good to see Josh Tongue get some overs in his legs, and like I said, Pat Brown and Sam Cook. Sam Cook and Alex Davis, two of the older statesmen of that group, they've done very, very well on that trip as well. So I think there's been some positives coming from that England Cricket Australia series. And then we've got the test match to come, which I think will be looks as though it's going to be a very, very good game.
Just in case anyone missed the scorecard, we're talking about the England Lions, who clung on for a dramatic draw against Cricket Australia 11, with Rocky Flintoff making 108 off 127 balls. Very quickly, we've got other stories to cover, but I find it slightly confusing that England under-19s are playing simultaneously in South Africa, captained by Archie Vaughan. So I know that selection is very subject close to your heart. How do you decide? I mean, there's lots of 17, 18-year-olds in the Lions group, or 19-year-olds. Who could play for the under-19s. So what sort of criteria there? Are we talking personality or physical strength, or what? How do you? Because as you said, Lions used to be the A team.
Yeah, Lions used to be the A team, but now it's not. It's just identifying talent. I think identifying talent for certain situations in team environments that we want to fast forward their education in the game. And if we are doing it the way we want to, which is from an England point of view, on tour in the winters, it'll stand them in good stead going back to their counties in the summer. There are a few, not head scratchers, but some different decisions have been made. Young Riansborough, Farhan Ahmed, he's not with this lot. He's Archie Vaughan, who had a good summer. England are, question mark in their 1, 2, and 3 going forward. So, look, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't on selection. I think they've just identified this is the talent pool that we want to take to the Lions. These ones aren't quite there just yet, so they're going to go and play for the under-19s. I'm always keen on young players dominating their age, their own sort of environment, their own age group. So, if in a great world and that everything's blue sky and the sun's shining, the under-19s and the Lions trip weren't simultaneous together, and there was a chance that the likes of Flintoff and Hamza Sheikh and one or two others could have gone on the under-19s tour, then bounced into the Lions tour like they used to do it. Then they learn how to dominate, come into the sort of more difficult series in good form, and with runs and wickets under their belt, and then hopefully they can step up to the mark. But it hasn't been the case in this instant. But I think from a talent point of view, I think it's identifying individuals who you want to fast forward their education, and it looks as though the ones who qualified for England under-19s, they're the ones that they see as obviously from a future point of view going to get there a little bit quicker than the rest.
And Shoaib Bashir 1 for 100 odd, 109.
That's concerning.
Irrelevant, right? Oh, is it? Is that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is a little bit. I said at the end of New Zealand, is that he averages 45. He's a young lad and he's learning, and it's good that he's been exposed again to Australia and get used to the Australian conditions, because that's what he's been identified for 18 months ago. And I said at the end of New Zealand, if he can get to Australia in 9 months' time, averaging 35, his career path and trajectory is going in the right way. So I don't know what's happening. I've not spoke to anybody out there. I don't know where he's at when it comes to whether he's bowling well or he's just had a little bit of, not had a great deal of luck. But you'd want him to see probably better returns, especially in the wicket column, because that's what he went for. If he was going at 5 and 6 and over and picking up wickets, I wouldn't be bothered. But the fact that he's not picking up wickets and he's not getting players out, that would be a little bit of a concern.
Okay, moving on. The delegates from the 100 and the MLC, Major League Cricket in America, have obviously spent some time in a boardroom and agreed that they will not overlap, so that top pros won't have to make a choice between the 100 and MLC. However, the 100 and the CPL, the Caribbean Premier League, will clash, which could lead to a number of high-profile West Indians having to choose whether to play at home in the CPL, support their local competition, or play in the 100. It's all getting a bit nasty, I think. It's dog eat dog, isn't it? I mean, these tournaments are going to start putting each other out of business sooner or later. Yeah,
and unfortunately, the Caribbean, I think they're not winning. Unfortunately, they're not winning. The West Indian lads, there's no allegiance to their islands. It's about who pays the most bucks, and that's it. They'll come over to England. A little bit like what England players got offered in the MLC. It just seems as though the MLC corporation are going to be buying into the 100. I think the cynical way of looking at it is all the companies who have got MLC teams are going to have 100 teams by the time the franchises are sold. I don't think that's the case in the Caribbean. So, look, we need a window. It's self-evident that we need a window for test matches when we can get the test match played around the world, and the World Test Championship becomes a very, very good product for the longer format of the game. And we also need a window for the white ball, and especially the franchise stuff. And I think we're talking about having 2 tiers of test match cricket. We need to have 2 tiers of franchise cricket. And that's where the ICC need to step up, and adults in a room show some leadership qualities and make sure that, yes, the players want to play in everything. They can't, but they're going to make sure that the best leagues are on at the best times. They don't conflict with anybody, and the cricket standard is very, very high. I'm not sure we're getting that at this moment in time in the franchise.
By the way, Harmy, when I saw that Johnny Grave, our old friend, had been appointed chief executive of Major League Cricket, I thought, good move.
Good move, yeah. Good move, and it won't be conflicting with the English summer. I mean, the 100 in the summer. So yeah, it's a good move for Johnny, and we wish him all the best because he's a good friend of the show and he listens a lot, and he did wonders for Caribbean cricket. To spread the word and get cricket into America. I couldn't think of a better person to organise and pull it all together, especially from a commercial point of view and from the product point of view. So I think the MLC have gained a good man there.
Okay, on to the final word. One each this week. You go first.
I love the Mitch Owen story. I mean, I love that story. It's so good. And then when you see it again, you remember it. It's like the finals day a few years ago when Rob Key was getting abused by Nasser Hussain when the little lad was dancing on the steps. I think he had a Hampshire shirt on. It was at the Rose Bowl. He was giving it 6-0 on the music was on. And I mean, the young lad Mitch Owen 10 years ago celebrating he was devastated that the Hobart Hurricanes didn't win in their BBL finals day, and then 10 years later to be there at the end to be the lead man. For me, that's why we love cricket.
Just in case people missed it, the Hobart Hurricanes get to the final of the Big Bash, and everybody loves Hobart because they're perennial minnows, always the underdogs. And then this fellow reaches his 100 in the final from 39 balls.
Ridiculous.
Hits 11 sixes and 5 fours, and he's a Hobart boy. And he's lived all his life in Hobart. He's always been a Hurricanes supporter, and I'm not surprised you picked that one. Mine, Harmy, is back to the Paarl Royals again and Joe Root. They became the first franchise team in franchise cricket history to bowl all 20 overs of spin, of which Joe bowled 4. Yeah. Only other time it's happened at top-level T20 cricket was at the Asia Games when Malaysia bowled 20 overs against Bangladesh. I mean, there was a beautiful moment as well, but afterwards when the Paarl Royals coach Trevor Penny, who he was doing the awards, the post-match awards inside the change room, and he said, and finally the TFC award goes to the fast bowling coach.
It's great, isn't it? I mean, was it 2 weeks ago we were talking about Multan's pitch and going, what it would be like to be a fast bowler in a Pakistan side. If you lose a toss and you bowl first and you just take the shine off the new ball, 3 overs, you only bowl 3 or 4 overs in 5 days. Well, you go to the Paarl Royals, you sign a big contract, you stand and you do plenty of fielding practice to you up your game as a fielder, knowing that you might not even bowl an over. Fantastic. Stand up, fine leg, 45, do a little shuttle, 35, 40 metres each time for 20 overs and earn your money by not bowling. Fantastic.
And go and play a round of golf at Pearl Valley.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, alongside former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. We'll be back at the same time next week, live from India, reviewing the T20 series and looking ahead to the ODIs with every ball live and exclusive here on talkSPORT 2. But for now, thanks for your company. This has been Following On.